Good evening. I don't think I've ever said good evening at one of these events before. It's usually good morning or good afternoon. But I thank you for bearing with us. You've got certainly some stamina to still be around here at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday evening when the bar is all but open. So hopefully, in the next 20 minutes or less, I will be able to give you a little bit of an insight into a risk-based approach to the management of a merchant portfolio. Now, the presentation, I guess, was originally conceived mainly for merchant service providers, so payment service providers, acquirers, ISOs, the like, but it's equally applicable to any entity with a large number of organizations within it that need to be assessed as compliant under PCI. So let's get this thing. Oh, here we go. So first of all, we'll talk a little bit about why measuring cybersecurity risk actually matters within the context of PCI programs, how we actually go about doing it, and what we can actually do to raise the cybersecurity bar. So, firstly, a little bit about zero risk. I was introduced as being part of Advantio. I'd just like to sort of explain a little bit that since the presentation was originally scheduled, Zero Risk has become an independent company. We are now operating as a partner with Advantio, but we are very much a tech company in our own right. Zero Risk is a SaaS platform. It's PCI DSS 4.0 ready. We've got an integrated proprietary cyber risk scoring engine within the platform. And we can provide access to a whole range of security solutions and services to support the needs of anybody within a program. And it's designed and built by a team of PCI program veterans. Hopefully you can see from the grey hair that I have been in this game for quite some time. So, next slide. Yeah, why does cybersecurity risk matter? I think we probably all understand why, but it's probably worth highlighting a little bit about what's been going on over the last decade, really, I would say. There's a huge amount of digital transformation has gone on in that time. Clearly, it's been accelerated by COVID. Pretty much all payment channels now are using tech. Doesn't matter what sort of business you are, whether you're an ice cream seller or a small restaurant, the chances are you will be running your business with technology, both the administration, the applications associated with that business, and obviously taking your payments. All customer engagement these days is driven by tech, social media and email, whatever ways you use to reach out to your customers, you're going to be reliant on tech. And of course, clearly, connectivity. There's a lot of evolving social attack vectors. I think if we go back to why PCI was originally conceived, it was very much around protecting cardholder data. And that's really what the criminals at the time were looking for. However, today, there's a lot of other sort of approaches that fraudsters and criminals can use to actually extract their quarry. And social attack vectors are by far the easiest and most profitable methods to use. So phishing, malware, ransomware, they're all effectively sort of powered by deception, social tricks to lead people doing things that they'd rather not or wish they hadn't done when the consequences become clear. There's a lot of reliance on third-party organizations, so the platforms people use, the payments that they take, and the business systems they use. A lot of this stuff is no longer actually directly in their control. So from a sort of cyber risk perspective, that presents its own challenges. We also have to consider, particularly as payment services providers, what are the implications, or what is the impact on revenue? It's worth considering what might happen to a merchant were it taken down by a ransomware attack. Not being able to take payments for days or even weeks could be it's clearly damaging to the affected organization. But it represents an impact on the payments that an acquirer is able to process. And finally, I think the other thing that kind of gets a little bit overlooked is that there is an opportunity there. Small organisations do, by and large, struggle with cybersecurity. So as an MSP and a trusted services provider to these organisations, there is a tremendous opportunity to provide stewardship and support and serve the needs of these merchants with the sort of tools and services that they require to keep their businesses safe. So moving on, this seems to be a little bit slow. I think I like to look at it as being sort of cyber risk, know your customer. As any sort of payments professional would know, you do have to undertake a certain amount of due diligence before you take them on as a client. And I think cyber risk is one of these areas within a business that kind of gets a little bit sort of ignored. We're looking at the sort of the financial and reputational factors that help make us a decision as to whether we're going to take them on as a customer. But we're not really looking too much at what they look like from a cyber risk perspective. And from a merchant perspective, it's pretty important that they are, sort of helped and put into a position where they're sort of healthy and secure. And where cardholders are concerned, we want to be engaging with organisations or suppliers that we can trust when it comes to making payments. So how do we actually measure cyber risk? There's a lot of techniques that are used these days. I think, I'm not sure how much people know about the sort of emergence of this cyber risk measurement technology. It's been around for probably 7 or 8 years now. It was originally, I think, driven primarily by the needs of the insurance industry, but there's a whole sort of sector now of companies that are able to measure risk and score risk of organisations, and this is sort of it's proven to be primarily the domain of enterprises looking to assess the risk of their supply chains, but we are now using it within the context of PCI programs, and I think it's a good sort of way to try and. I like to use analogies, and I think sort of there's some very sort of useful parallels between our own health and cyber health. So if we consider that what we're actually looking for when we assess an organisation is a symptom, we look at what we call indicators of risk, but you could argue that those are indicators of health because all the time they don't represent a risk. They are, it shows that an organisation is in good health. But if we come across an indicator of risk that falls beneath a certain threshold, we would define that as effectively a symptom. Now, for every symptom, there is usually a cause, and those causes tend to be quite simple. It's usually something to do with how a system or how systems are set up, how they're configured, how they're designed, how they're maintained, and how they're tested. So there's nothing sort of too, I guess, sort of complex there. It's getting the basics right, which is usually what is behind whether or not an indicator of risk is in good standing. And the effect is really what the threat is. So if that symptom is exploited, what potentially could happen? So could it have a financial impact on the organisation if it's actually exploited? And then we come to the whole issue of treatment. So is there a way of actually addressing the problem so that it goes away? So that's really the remedy to that vulnerability. And out of that, we get a prescription. So that's what you actually need to do to put things right. So that could be a service, a solution, or a tool. So think of cyber risk in terms of cyber health. So what are the sources of symptoms? We've categorized them as follows. We know that there are sources of risk that come from the third parties that organizations use. We know that the complexity of an organization's system setup is often the root cause of these symptoms. We also refer to hackability. So what is the likelihood that somebody can actually get into an organization by the way that it's configured? And then we're also looking at the dark web. We're looking at various sort of sources of information that suggest an organisation may have previously been attacked or may have had data compromised as a result of another third-party incident. So we're looking at various different sources of symptoms to make our decisions. So, what are the most common causes of cyber risk? I think it's worth bearing that in mind. Firstly, it's the build, it's the design. When was it built? Who built it? How was it designed? What sort of security tools are in there? It's interesting to look at the more sort of modern sort of e-commerce stores. A lot of these are now built around very trusted independent service providers, platforms where there's a lot of security built in. But there are sort of more rudimentary systems out there that have been built over time, perhaps not necessarily designed and maintained to today's standards. They definitely represent a risk. The whole configuration of a system, there's lots of features that are built into these platforms that can be switched on or left off. So it's very much a case of how are things set up, how are things configured, are all the security settings set to what would be recommended best practice. Then there's the whole area of maintenance. We hear a lot about how we're always in need of updating our systems. Maintenance is absolutely critical. Anybody who is not maintaining their systems is being likely to be left exposed to risk. However, who is responsibility for that maintenance? It's very difficult for small organisations to do this sort of thing in-house, so they're very much reliant on others to do it for them. So it's understanding the ownership of the maintenance. Is it a shared responsibility? Are people applying the updates that are required? Then there's the whole area of testing. We know that things never stand still, and there's always a need to keep testing to check that things are as they should be. So testing the applications, testing the network, and also sort of testing things from a social perspective. So phishing assessments and that type of thing to ensure that the users within an organisation are fully prepared for the sort of risks they could be exposed to. Education, user awareness. It's amazing how we live in a world where I would say that the sort of the consciousness of the sort of things that can happen and what cyber risk can mean to organisations is high. But by and large, people still remain fairly ignorant of what it is they should necessarily be doing on a day-to-day basis to protect themselves. Both as sort of individuals and as employees. So, education needs to be, sort of regularly I guess, applied. People need to understand what the best practices are that they need to adhere to. And it needs to be practical and pragmatic. You can't pump out content that is going to baffle the users that it's intended to reach. And then finally, systems need to be fit for purpose. One of the things that we can quite often see is that relatively small organisations have overly complex systems, which is potentially very damaging or dangerous situation to be in. So, what is the effect? Putting a price on cyber risk. I think I've been in and around this industry for a long time, and I would say that one of the things that we're pretty bad at is actually putting a price on risk. In a lot of selling, it's all about providing evidence of return on investment. With cybersecurity, providing evidence of a return on investment can be pretty difficult, and this is why you need to price in risk. So if you consider the cost of the fraud, the theft and the deception that could result from an attack, the business continuity. Started out the presentation by saying that if an organisation is taken down for a few days, you need to consider what impact that has on business, what that impact has on the payment service provider. So any sort of business interruption, the ability to sell and deliver services is bad news. Misplaced data, payment data, personal data, business confidential data. What is the cost of that? What does it mean to you as a business? The reputational damage, from a B2C and a B2B perspective? Are people going to continue to buy from you? If they don't, what is the cost of that? The financial sanctions that can result, the fines, the fees, the liability that results from a cyber attack. And finally, the repair bills, the forensics that need to be undertaken, the fixes and the PR. So there's a lot of things here that can actually be priced into why managing things from a cyber risk perspective is important. So how do we actually calculate and measure portfolio risk? I think it's worth considering a very simple risk equation. I tend to keep this in my head and often think about it when it comes to sort of what is the value that we're really providing when it comes to delivering a system like this. So we take the risk, we look at the symptom, we times it by the effect, times it by the event cost, and then times it by the number of merchants. So if you've got a portfolio of merchants, anything will obviously be accentuated by the size of that portfolio. So if we take a quick example here and look at the credentials being exposed on the dark web. So there's a lot of credentials out there. These could actually be used to lead to some form of social attack, which results in an untrained member of staff falling for a phishing attack and leading to a ransomware incident occurring within an organization. Let's say that ransomware leads to the organization being unable to trade for a period of time, and then you times that by 200. So you start to recognize or calculate that multiple merchants within a portfolio being impacted by a ransomware attack at the same time can have a fairly damaging effect financially. So what can we do to raise the cybersecurity bar? I think the first thing to do is we know the first thing to do is actually profile a merchant portfolio. When merchant numbers run into hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, it's very important to start to get some sort of idea of what the risk potentially looks like. And what we do is we take a view of what you actually know about your merchants. So, what sort of business intelligence do you maintain on your CRM systems, within your compliance programs? What are the size of these merchants in terms of the revenue they bring in? What are the sectors that they operate in? We then look at what the risk profiling delivers. So within zero risk, we can do the risk scoring. We can give you the information that helps you put some order into this data. And then we can also ask more questions. I think it's important to be finding out more about your merchants all the time, and certainly we would recommend sort of extracting more information from them during the profiling phase or the onboarding phase of using zero risk. And then it's a case of prioritizing, looking at merchants from a macro basis, looking at merchants from a segmented basis, and then potentially looking at them on a sort of an individual basis where the risk is high. And then ultimately, it's about protecting those merchants. So establishing a baseline, ensuring that all the organizations are doing the things that they should be doing, things are correctly configured, they're aware of what the issues are they need to be prepared to deal with. Then it's about raising the bar, generally getting the level of health within a portfolio up. And then I guess it comes to what we would call staying safe or monitoring and maintaining. So getting merchants to a level where they're in good health, they're regularly tested, and ultimately perhaps even cyber insured, so that should anything go wrong, everybody's covered. So that is pretty much it from me this afternoon. I guess what I would the message I'd leave with you is that it is important to know your customers from a cyber perspective. We tend to know them from a financial perspective. We carry out other due diligence checks on them, but we tend to be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to cyber security. And I think that cybersecurity, married with the compliance that comes with PCI DSS, is very much the way forward for any organisation managing a large number of merchants. So that's it from me. I've given you back 1 minute, so I encourage you to get to the bar and to use those tokens and enjoy your evening. Thank you very much.